How y'all doing, ladies and gentlemen, kings and queens? It's Chris Sparkman. I'm here to talk about being intentional. We always hear be intentional in life, be intentional in your career, be intentional in your relationships, be intentional in all your endeavors. And I ask myself, and I ask you, what is being intentional? I wrote down in my notes a few things. I put, being intentional means acting with a purpose. Being intentional means aligning your thoughts, actions, and efforts toward an objective. Being intentional is making the conscious decision and not operating on autopilot. Being intentional involves awareness, focus, and commitment. Being intentional will guide your behavior. Being intentional about your life or about your career or about your relationships is to make the conscious decision. It's not to make a choice. When we choose something, we can choose against it just as fast as we chose it. I hope y'all follow me on that. When we choose something, we can choose against it just as fast as we chose it. So being intentional means making a decisive decision. You decide and you ride. Decision. We decide and we ride. We decide we ride with that. Ride or die with that. That's what intentional's being about. Intentional is 365 days a year, 52 weeks. Intentional involves growth. Intentional is not accidental. Intentional means whatever comes at me, I'm taking that. But I'm still going to align myself and get back on course to accomplish whatever I want to be intentional about. I think about intentionality in my life, with my wife, with my kids, with my career. And it's not easy, not by a long shot. Being married for the first time in my life, sometimes arguments pop up that's very immature. And I try to fight through those arguments, but you have to understand from the other person's point of view. So this is where the intentional part kicks in. Because being intentional is going to make you more aware. And I'm a husband. So whether I like it or not, I'm wrong even when I'm right. And that's just me being intentional. But I remember one incident, my wife, she had took a loan out, and we were on the same page about this loan. But as time went, I'm living my husband life, she's living her wife life. I kind of fall out of the order of knowing if she's paying on this loan, thinking that she has it, but me not being intentional and having an open line of communication with my wife, I fall out of alignment with her about her making the payment on her loan. So she comes to me one day and tells me that she's late on her payment. Now me, being the man that I am, I jump to conclusions. And me jumping to conclusions leads to her being irritated, leads to us arguing, leads to bickering back and forth. And then intention jumps in. See, intentional means putting your feelings behind you and focusing on the reality. And that's what I had to do. I had to stop talking in hindsight with my wife. I had to focus on the reality of the situation and say, This what happened, this what was, and this is what we're gonna do. The decision. And making that decision leads her to feel more secure and comfortable. So now we know that it's not what happened, it's what we're gonna do about it. And that's being intentional. We solve our problem by saying we're not gonna focus on what has happened, we're gonna focus on the here and now, and we're gonna make a solution for it. And that's being intentional. Being intentional is the solution to the pollution. Being intentional involves growth. We both learned in that situation what not to do and how to approach it the next time it appears. And being intentional is just that in itself. Have you asked yourself, what is it in my life that I need to be more intentional about? What is popping up right now in my mind that's saying, hey, I need to address this and approach this with intention? I wrote something else in my notes. Being intentional will come with mistakes. Let's call it failing forward. So being intentional is going to come with mistakes, but we're going to call it failing forward because being intentional is going to drive you to your goals. You see, I keep aligning it up because now you're saying I'm living for a purpose. I'm acting for a purpose by being intentional. So you're going to align yourself up with it. And when you align yourself up sometimes, outside forces will have you react in a way to make you make mistakes. Or maybe the ambition of your intention may make you make mistakes. But we call it failing forward because we learn what not to do. And I bring it back full circle to what me and my wife had went through with this situation with finances. We both learned what not to do. And we made our relationship the intention instead of the problem being the intention. So we aligned ourselves with what the purpose of our life is, our marriage, and taking care of problematic areas in our life that they will not come up again. So I asked you the question today. Where do you want to go in your life? How far can you go by being intentional in your life? Because intentional starts today. Intentional involves growth. Intentional, and it's going to hurt a lot of feelings right here, it's not growing on accident. Intentional is being intentional about your growth, about your development, about your personal growth and development. It's not something that happens accidentally. You may see it as you look around. Individuals accidentally grow. It's an old saying, you either gonna learn by crook or hook. Either somebody gonna teach you or you gonna learn by experience, by failing. And when you're intentional about what you're doing, you're failing forward. When you're accidental and you fail, it costs you more than you are willing to pay. So intentional is now and killing the later. It starts today. Take your life by the steering wheel and be intentional about your decisions. I pose another question to you. Do you know any time in your life where you have been intentional about something? And if you have, what was the outcome? What was your drive? What was your endeavor? What inspired you? What motivated you? Was there transformation when you decided to be intentional? Think about that. Ponder on that. Because that should give you enough juice today to say, I'm going to be intentional about my career. I'm going to be intentional about my relationships. I'm going to be intentional about my growth. Because when you decide to make that decision, and that decision that you make today will run the course of your life. Being intentional is not something we just say. This is a principle woven into the universe. It's a principle that millionaires, pro athletes, famous actors, famous book writers have took and placed in their treasure chest because they knew and they know that being intentional about anything in life leads to prosperity. You look at Napoleon Hill. He told you the law of intentionality. John Maxwell, he said, growth compounds and it accelerates. That's intentionality. Dale Carnegie, Jim Rohn. We talk about these men because these men knew these principles. And specifically, this one principle, being intentional. So today is your day to make the conscious decision to be intentional. How can you be intentional today? Because this is so serious. I wrote three things down. How you can be intentional today. Make the decision, not the choice. How do you do that? Decide. Tell yourself, this is how I want my career. This is how I want my relationships. This is how I want to have personal growth in my life. Make the decision. Do not make this an option. This is not a choice. Make the decision today to be intentional. Secondly, don't let anybody stand in your way. That means when calamity comes, when adversity comes, learn perseverance. Because intentionality is you persevering through tasks. Do not let anyone stand in your way of what you have decided for your life. And number 3, hold yourself accountable. If you can have a accountability partner, more power to you. But the main person that needs to hold you accountable is that person in the mirror. You. Hold yourself accountable. Because guess what? You don't have anybody to hold your hand anymore. You shouldn't want anybody to hold your hand. You're a big man. You're a big girl now. Let's do it. Hold yourself accountable. In closing, here's intentional against accidental. And you choose what you want for your life. Intentional starts today. Accidental starts tomorrow. Procrastination. Intentional takes responsibility. Accidental wants it just to happen for him. You want it just to happen by accident. Who wants that? Be intentional. Intentional tries everything to its fullest potential. Accidental learns by mistake. Intentional works hard. Accidental quits before they even get started. Intentional has good habits. Accidental, bad habits. Intentional takes risks. Accidental doesn't take risks. Intentional has character. Accidental doesn't have character. Intentional follows through. Accidental procrastinates once again. Last but not least, intentional never stops. If you're watching this video today, you're intentional about your life. You heard it, you hear it, you perceive it, and you believe it. Today is your day to make the intentional decision to grow, to better your relationships, to better your career, to better your finances, to be overall better. Be intentional, not accidental.